want to start, from the beginning. Talk about those first conversations about doing this series, and what was the intention behind it?
7 years ago, I was working in daytime talk, and it was an assignment that I was given to go and see if I can secure Gypsy's interview for this daytime talk show. When I sat down to meet with her, she was not interested. She said no, and that's okay. So we sat there and just talked about regular life things, and I found her environment really fascinating. I went to meet with her in a traditional, normal visiting area. So there's other inmates in the room, so I was not alone with Gypsy. I was in a room full of other inmates, and what I found fascinating as she was sitting across from me is she started to tell me all these other inmate stories. She's like, that girl over there, she's in for killing her husband. That girl over there, she's horrible to bunk with. So I'm like, oh wow, this is like high school on steroids. Like, this is crazy. I found it really fascinating. And then one thing I found fascinating as well is that for the first time, Gypsy was a free woman, and these female inmates were educating her on how to be a woman. So you'll have to forgive me because it's been a while since we did the documentary, and I don't know if we touched on this, but one thing that was shocking to me that Gypsy told me was that when, as a woman, and forgive me men in the room, but when she would start her menstrual cycle, her mother would put her on kids' diapers. So she didn't know, just even feminine hygiene. And so I was like, wow, this is like a coming of age in prison. And so I stayed in touch with her, and that was the start. There's so much to share. Sorry, I'll just shut up.
Well, to that point, she said no at first. Which is surprising to me because when you watch, she seems just like this open book and also very well adjusted to what she's been through. What was the process of getting her to want to share her story?
Well, at the beginning, she wanted me to talk to her mom, Christy. She calls her stepmother mom, Christy. And I just stayed in touch over the years, just here and there, and really was being respectful of her space and never, just that's what she wanted to do. And then there was an opportunity where one day she called me and said, okay, I feel ready to tell my story. And actually, there's things that my stepmom, does not know. And that's when she revealed the opiate addiction. And she's like, they don't even know this yet. And so she started to reveal that. And then she started to reveal the sexual abuse. I was like, whoa, there's a lot more here to divulge and to explore. And that's when I said, oh, and then one of the things that was a triggering event for her is just in prison, she would get TV and she would watch her story play out by other people. And she wanted to share her story her way. I was like, okay, we're ready.
And Ryan, was that a key part for you too, wanting to EP?
I mean, I got involved because I fell in love with her. That's the truth. Like I said, I wrote her a letter, and and then this story came about the documentary. They wanted to do it, and I was kind of like a surprise ending. When it started, I wasn't involved.
Yes, very much a surprise.
Very much a surprise. So I got involved just in the last little steps. My story came in, and I remember Gypsy telling me, she kept telling Melissa, hey, y'all need to interview this guy. This guy's very important.
Yeah.
And then it came out later that we were getting married. So just one of those things. That's how I got involved. Just kind of fell in it.
Love. How much access were you given to Gypsy once, this kind of came into play? And what was that permission kind of process like with the prison system?
Okay, so I have kids that are in their 20s, and so they will tell you that they still hear Gypsy's voice, her phone calls every Tuesday. No. So she has to do a recording, and when you accept the recorded prison phone call, it gives us standard template, and you're gonna know it. Hey, it's Gypsy.
I heard it a lot. Yeah, I heard it a lot.
So like the cadence and everything is like when she would, even now as she's a free woman, when she calls, my kids are like, "Hey, it's Gypsy." And okay, so every Tuesday she would call, and her access varied because of the prison system. So at the beginning she had 15-minute phone calls, and then it would be interrupted with, "You have 1 minute remaining." You know, you have 30, like, you know, it just did a countdown. And so we would feel the pressure. She's like, "Okay, I'll call you back." And I'm like, "Okay, all right." So we would do that every Tuesday. And then I recorded those. And that's a big chunk of those recordings are in this documentary. Yeah.
And for 18 months, is that right?
What?
That you were doing that, the process, it was 18 months, right?
Yeah. It was even before that.
Okay.
But like really when Lifetime decided to be a part of this, that was when we started the 18-month project, and the recording started to filter towards that point of that this would be in the documentary.
Okay. I want to go back to the family as well. They seem to be kind of seeking answers as much as they're also trying to put kind of context into where they were at these different points in Gypsy's life. Can you talk about getting them to participate? Was there hesitation from any of her family members?
Christy was an open book right from the beginning. She wanted to share everything. She was ready to. What I loved about Christy is that she's always been an advocate for Gypsy and a non-judgmental advocate. She was the one who found in Dee Dee's house the medical pad, that the prescription pad. And she's the one who started to see that this was something bigger than any of us could imagine. So it was really her looking at this and finding this prescription pad that started the whole unraveling.
And then we see her father and grandfather.
Oh, I love Rod. Like, do you
Yeah.
guys love Rod? Like, he's
Rod's
really-
amazing. Yeah, I love Rod a lot.
Rod, he's such a wise sage. What I love about Rod is, and what I know we're talking about this doc right now, but I think like what I love about Rod is he's always been there for Gypsy, and he's always wanted a relationship with her. So I'm grateful that now they can start to have that.
Yeah. But we see you meet her family, which had to be even more nerve-wracking doing that on camera.
Absolutely.
What was that like for you?
I got drilled a little bit, you know, and it's one of those where the first time I met her sister was actually on camera. So it was one of those where she was very investigative, you know, trying to figure me out. And it was one of those where she grilled me, you know, and it was one of those where I just had to sit there and take it. And I took it with a smile, you know, because that was going to be my sister-in-law. So it was one of those where it was different. It was very different.
And as you mentioned, you know, your relationship was a surprise. The engagement was a surprise. And the entire last episode is focused on your relationship. How did you decide to pivot, you know, kind of in that moment and capture the
She didn't give us any choice.
Okay.
So like one thing that I learned a big lesson as a filmmaker, and that is that for me, I got really attached. Like I saw a vision for Gypsy that maybe wasn't her own vision, but I had a vision for Gypsy that she was going to walk out of prison, go into the safety and security of her parents' arms, and have this relationship that she never got with her parents, and that she was going to discover who she is, explore freedoms for the first time, riding a bike, driving a car, eating real food, different foods. Like, you know, she was eating prison food for the first time. That was her first taste of real food. It's prison food. So
I ruined her vision. Just I did. Just because we got married and, you know, threw a wrench in her plans. So.
It's okay though. But like that was the learning lesson, is like I knew when you're married as a woman that you have to compromise with your spouse, your partner. You have to, it's a give and take, and what you want has to be considered with the wants and needs of your partner. And I wanted Gypsy to be selfish. For the first time in her life, I wanted her to be selfish. Nothing tying her to the needs of anybody else but herself for the first time. That's what I visioned. So,
how did you manage that attachment?
well, when she told me she's getting married, I was very disappointed. And this is my regret, and this is what I did wrong. And I totally take accountability for that. I was very disappointed. I'm like, I wanted that for her, and I felt like she was making the wrong choice. And I stepped aside because I didn't want to influence her. And I felt so passionately that she should go this route because what I wanted for her, it was all good intentions. And then Christy and Rod actually told me, like, Melissa, you have to let her make mistakes if they're mistakes. Her mom didn't let her make mistakes. If it's a mistake, that's what she has to do. And that's what got me to see things differently. But I stepped aside so I wouldn't intervene. And I mean, Ryan, you could test for that. Like, I didn't.
Yeah, there was a moment where you just step back, but I still don't think I was a mistake. You know, I'm not you know, it's what it is.
Sorry.
I mean,
Sorry.
I was there for her. So
You're not a mistake. No, I didn't mean like that. Sorry.
It's okay. I'll talk to you about it outside. So.
But there's obviously a lot of private kind of conversation happening. But we also see in this series, you reveal some things to Gypsy as well. I think one was her not knowing like her first surgery was actually before the age of 1. Even her grandfather's response, to her accusation of sexual abuse with him. How did you decide, how to share those moments with her, on camera?
I knew she wanted to know her medical history. It was very shocking to go through her records and to have access to it before she did. But in the timeline course, she was arrested before she got to see the binders, is what I call them, the binders. Her mom kept medical records and a timeline of everything, but also one thing that surprised me when I went to go visit Christy to find pictures for this documentary, as we're going through the buckets of photos.
Many pictures.
I was finding receipts and finding documentation, like of bone marrow transplant, and like I was like, wow, what?
Well, to that point, Dr. Fabian, who's the psychologist in this series, he says no one in Gypsy's life intentionally failed her. For you, knowing her personally and you having interviewed all of these people, do you think that that's a fair statement?
I think Gypsy fell through a lot of cracks in our system. It was just one of those where, this person failed her, and it wasn't an intentional fail. It just happened. She fell through the cracks of everything that should have caught it. That's the way I look at it.
I think everybody focuses on the medical aspect, the medical community failed her, but I see the educational system failed her. Absolutely. Because she was homeschooled, and nobody was checking in on if she was making any progress in her education. That's where I feel like there was no oversight.
Absolutely.
Well, lastly, the very end card of the series says, her story will continue, and we know that life after lockup is coming. Talk about choosing where to end this series and where you're going to pick up in the next one.
Well, I was excited and ecstatic about that December 28th date that she was going to be released. And then...
Me too.
I know. And I realized that this was an opportunity to document what it's like to transition from prison into a parole system. I think there's a lot of unknowns about our judicial system and how our prison system works. And I wanted to take this opportunity to show through documentation of what the process is like, what parole really means, what does it mean to be a parolee, and what kind of jobs can you get, what liberties do you have, can you get a job, what can you do, can you get a house to live in?
Exactly. Well, thank you both so much for being here and sharing with us. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Brande.